Sometimes silence doesn't mean nothing. Sometimes it's the loudest cry a soul can make. There's a moment every man faces. A moment when the heart wants to speak, but the mouth refuses to move. You stand there looking at her, wanting to say something real, something that matters, but the words never come. And so you choose silence. But here's the truth most men don't realize, silence speaks whether you want it to or not. You can hide behind it. You can use it as armor. You can pretend it protects you. But silence, it always reveals what you're trying to conceal. It whispers the things your pride won't let you say. You see, brother, the world has trained you to believe that strength means being unshaken, that emotions are weakness, that tears are failure, that needing someone makes you less of a man. From the time you were a boy, they told you to man up, to stay strong, to never let them see you break. And somewhere between the battles and the expectations, you learned how to wear silence like a second skin. But deep down you crave peace. You crave connection. You crave love. You crave to be understood without judgment, to be seen without being exposed. And that craving and that silent ache all becomes the war inside you. You want to reach for her, but fear tells you, what if she doesn't reach back? You want to speak, but your pride whispers, what if she doesn't understand? You want to love, but your past warns, what if it ends like before? So you stay quiet. You stay still. You pretend you're fine, but silence doesn't heal. It hides, it delays, it corrodes. And the tragedy is, many men live their whole lives mistaking silence for strength. They think control equals peace, but it doesn't. Control without love is loneliness dressed up as discipline. There's a story inside every quiet man, a story of battles fought alone, of heartbreaks buried deep, of prayers whispered into the night. And in that silence lives the truth. He is not heartless. He's just tired of being misunderstood, tired of being judged for feeling, tired of giving more than he receives. But here's what I've learned. Silence can be a sanctuary or a prison. It depends on what you do with it. If you use silence to listen, it becomes wisdom. If you use silence to hide him, it becomes pain. You see, God never designed men to live voiceless. Even Adam, when he walked in the garden, had a voice that named creation. But when fear entered the heart of man, silence followed. It's the first symptom of shame. When a man hides his voice, he's really hiding his heart. And brother, maybe that's where you are right now, hiding behind stillness, avoiding the truth that your silence has become your cage. You look at her and you wonder, does she know? You hope she can read your eyes, that somehow she'll understand your quiet. But love doesn't thrive on assumption. Love needs truth. Love needs voice. You think you're protecting yourself by staying silent, but what if you're actually losing what was meant to heal you? What if your silence isn't peace, but fear wearing a mask? Because the truth is, silence doesn't always mean strength. Sometimes it means survival. Sometimes it means you've been hurt so deeply that words no longer feel safe. Sometimes it means you want to be known but not misunderstood. But there comes a day when silence starts to suffocate you, when the walls you built to stay safe begin to close in, when the craving inside you, sound for connection, for honesty, for love, becomes louder than your fear. That's the moment God waits for. The moment when the man who's been silent for too long finally whispers, Lord, I can't carry this anymore. Because real strength isn't silence, it's surrender. It's the courage to face what you've buried. It's the humility to admit that control has cost you peace. You were never meant to fight your battles in the dark. You were meant to walk in truth even when it trembles. Because the truth will set you free, but silence will keep you bound. Brother, I don't know what your silence is hiding. Maybe it's pain, maybe it's regret, maybe it's love unspoken. But know this, silence might protect you from rejection, but it also keeps you from resurrection. The grave is silent too, and that's not where you belong, so speak. Not because the world demands it, but because your soul needs it. Speak truth.
Speak love.
Speak peace. Because silence might feel safe, but it will never set you free. And one day, when the craving becomes too strong to ignore, you'll realize that silence was never strength. It was simply the pause before courage. And courage, my friend, that's when the healing begins. Part 2. When silence is born of fear. Fear doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers through silence. Brother, there's a kind of quiet that doesn't come from peace. It comes from fear. The kind that grips your chest and convinces you that saying nothing is safer than being misunderstood. You tell yourself you're protecting your heart, but really you're hiding it. Fear has a language. And for men, that language often sounds like silence. It starts small. Maybe you open up once. To her, to a friend, to God. And you don't get the response you hoped for. You feel unseen. You feel foolish. You feel like your truth was too heavy for their hands. And so the next time you don't speak, you tell yourself, it's better this way. But it's not. Because every time you swallow your words, you feed your fear. And the more you feed it, the stronger it becomes. The world looks at you and says he's calm, he's composed. But they don't see the storm that silence is holding back. They don't see how many nights you've prayed for someone to ask, "Are you really okay?" And mean it. You've been taught to face fear by fighting, not by feeling. To conquer, not to confess. But fear doesn't flee from fists. It flees from truth. The devil doesn't tremble when you stay silent. He trembles when you speak truth in faith. And here's the thing. Fear always disguises itself as logic. It says, "Don't speak. They won't understand. Don't try. It won't work. Don't love. It'll hurt again." But brother, that's not logic. That's fear pretending to be wisdom. Fear builds walls and calls them boundaries. Fear isolates and calls it independence. Fear stays silent and calls it strength. But truth exposes fear for what it is. A liar. You see, courage doesn't mean you're not afraid. It means you've decided fear won't be your master anymore. God never promised a life without fear, but he did promise his presence in the middle of it. And the presence of God is louder than the silence of fear. Every time fear tells you to stay quiet, remember this. Your voice was given for more than survival. It was given to speak life. When God breathed into Adam, he didn't just give him air, he gave him voice. The power to name, to define, to declare. That same breath is still in you. Brother, what are you afraid of saying? That you're tired? That you're lonely? That you miss someone? That you don't have it all figured out? That's not weakness. That's honesty. And honesty is the soil where healing grows. But healing can't happen in silence. You can't expect wounds to close when they've never been cleaned. You can't ask God to free you while you're still chained to the fear of being seen. Fear will tell you, stay hidden. Faith will whisper, step out. And the step doesn't have to be big. It just has to be real. One word, one prayer, one conversation. That's how fear begins to lose its grip. Maybe today your silence isn't pride, it's protection. Maybe it's the only thing keeping you from breaking. But what if breaking is what leads you to breakthrough? The cross wasn't quiet. It was the loudest declaration of love the world has ever heard. And the same God who spoke life into darkness can speak courage into your fear, if you'll let him. Brother, fear wants to convince you that speaking will cost you too much. But silence costs more. It costs connection. It costs purpose. It costs peace. Don't let fear make you mute, because the man who won't speak his truth becomes a prisoner of his thoughts, and the man who hides his wounds keeps himself from healing. If you've been quiet because you're afraid to lose, afraid to be judged, afraid to be alone, I want you to remember this. Fear may visit, but it doesn't get to stay. You are not defined by what frightens you. You are defined by what you face in faith. Speak. Even if your voice shakes, pray. Even if your faith feels small, reach out. Even if rejection feels possible. Because silence may protect you from pain, but it will also protect you from peace. And brother, peace is worth the risk. One day you'll look back and realize that fear's greatest weapon wasn't what it made you feel. It was what it kept you from saying. So let the silence break. Let your voice return. Because when fear loses your silence, it loses its power. What you call craving might just be your soul remembering what it was made for. Brother, there's a hunger that sleep can't quiet and success can't satisfy. You've tried. You've worked harder, run faster, prayed longer. Yet something inside still whispers there's more. It's that ache you feel when the world goes silent and you're left alone with your thoughts. That's not weakness. That's a reminder. You crave love, not the shallow kind that flickers and fades, but the kind that anchors you. The kind that knows your darkness and still chooses you in daylight. You crave peace, not the fragile silence after chaos, but the deep calm that no storm can steal. You crave purpose, the reason you wake up and fight when your strength is gone. But here's the truth. Your craving isn't random. It's holy. It's God's fingerprint pressed against your chest calling you back home. The world will tell you to numb it. Keep moving. Stay busy, make money, find someone new. But you already know distractions don't heal desire. They only delay it. You see, craving becomes calling when you stop running from it and start listening to it. Because what if your longing isn't a curse, but a compass? What if that restlessness inside you is the echo of heaven saying, there's more for you than this? Brother, you've tried to fill the void with everything this world offers. Success, validation, even people. And for a moment it feels full. But emptiness always returns, because nothing temporary can fill what's eternal. The reason your heart still aches isn't because you're broken. It's because you were built for something beyond this world. The craving inside you is not for more things. It's for more meaning. When a man loses his sense of calling, he mistakes craving for weakness. He numbs it with noise. But the soul doesn't stop whispering. It keeps calling through the cracks of your silence. Sometimes the ache you feel at night isn't loneliness. It's your purpose trying to wake you up. Listen. Don't rush past it. Don't drown it in distraction. Let the craving speak. Ask yourself, what if this longing I feel is God telling me, you were made for more than comfort? You were made for courage. Every man has a calling, not just to build, not just to conquer, but to love deeply, to lead with integrity, to live with purpose. And craving, that quiet ache, is the invitation to return to that mission. It's the voice of God, soft yet unshakable, saying, I place something in you the world can't satisfy because it didn't give it. Maybe that's why you're restless. Maybe that's why no matter what you achieve, it still feels incomplete. Because you weren't created to be fulfilled by the world. You were created to reflect heaven. Brother, craving is the conversation between your soul and your Creator. It's not meant to shame you. It's meant to shape you. It's the reason you still care when others have gone cold. It's the reason you still dream when life tells you to give up. It's the reason your silence hurts. Because you were made to speak life, not suppress it. When craving becomes calling, life starts to shift. Your pain becomes purpose. Your silence becomes story. Your waiting becomes worship. You begin to realize that what you've been searching for was never out there. It was always inside, waiting for your attention. And when you bring that craving before God, something sacred happens. He doesn't condemn you for wanting more. He refines the want until it becomes direction. He teaches you that craving peace leads to prayer. Craving love leads to surrender. Craving purpose leads to obedience. That's the transformation into when your hunger becomes holy. Brother, the craving in your chest isn't something to curse. It's something to follow. Because when craving becomes calling, you stop chasing what's next and start becoming who you were, meant to be. The silence that once felt empty begins to sound like guidance. The ache that once felt heavy begins to feel holy, and you realize your craving was never about what you didn't have. It was about who you were called to become. So don't despise the longing. Let it lead you. Don't curse the emptiness. Let it prepare you. Because the moment you stop running from your craving is the moment you start walking in your calling. Love doesn't always ask you to fight harder. Sometimes it asks you to lay your weapons down. Brother, the hardest thing for a man to do is not to conquer, it's to surrender. You've fought your way through storms. You've carried the weight of expectations, pain, and pride. You've built walls around your heart so tall that even God has to whisper through the cracks to reach you. And yet, in the quiet moments, you feel it. That gentle tug of love asking, will you let go now? Because real love doesn't come to control you. It comes to cleanse you. It doesn't want your perfection. It wants your permission. Permission to enter the places you've kept guarded, to touch the wounds you've refused to show. But surrender feels like weakness, doesn't it? The world told you that men don't bow, that strength means never bending. Yet, brother, there's a kind of strength that only shows up when you kneel. When you surrender to love, you're not giving up the fight. You're giving up the fear. You're laying down your pride, your control, your need to be right, and choosing to trust something greater than yourself. See, love is not for the faint-hearted. Love will challenge you more than war ever could, because it's easy to swing a sword, but it's hard to open your heart. It's easy to build walls, but it takes faith to build bridges. You want love to be safe, simple, predictable. But love is not a formula. It's a fire. It burns away everything false until only truth remains, and maybe that's why you've run from it. Maybe you've mistaken comfort for peace. Maybe you've confused numbness with strength. But love, real love, doesn't numb you. It awakens you. It brings you face to face with your deepest fears and your truest self. It asks questions your pride doesn't want to answer. It exposes the masks you wear and the lies you tell yourself to stay in control. You see, brother, love is not something you win. It's something you welcome. It's not something you demand. It's something you demonstrate, and the first step toward love is surrender. Surrender to forgiveness. Surrender to vulnerability. Surrender to the truth that you cannot love fully until you let go completely. That's why God keeps calling men to lay their burdens down, not because he wants to weaken them, but because he wants to free them. A man with clenched fists can't receive anything new, but a man with open hands can catch grace. Love is not found in control. It's found in surrender. Because control says, I'll only love if it's safe. But surrender says, I'll love because it's right. Brother, maybe the reason love hasn't worked before is because you were trying to control it instead of letting it change you. Maybe you wanted the comfort of love without the cost of surrender. But love that costs nothing changes nothing. And here's the mystery. The more you surrender, the stronger you become. Because surrender doesn't strip you of power. It aligns you with purpose. When you finally let go, you make room for grace to move, and grace can do in one moment what effort couldn't do in a lifetime. So stop trying to earn love. You were never meant to. Love isn't a wage. It's a gift, and gifts aren't earned, and they're received. When Jesus hung on that cross, he didn't say, fight harder. He said, it is finished. That was not defeat. That was divine. Surrender. And that's the same surrender God calls you to today, to release what you can't control, to forgive what you can't fix, to love even when it hurts, because surrender doesn't mean you lose. It means you trust that God can do more with your open hands than you ever could with closed ones. Brother, love will ask for your pride, your plans, your pain, and it will give you peace in return. It will ask you to risk being broken, but it will rebuild you stronger. It will ask you to let go, but it will fill your empty hands with purpose. So tonight, before you close your eyes, ask yourself, what am I still holding that love has been asking me to surrender? And when you find the answer, don't be afraid to let go, because surrender isn't the end of your strength. It's the beginning of your freedom. Love demands surrender, because only surrendered hearts can truly love. You can't see it, but he's carrying it, the weight of everything he can't say. Brother, there's a quiet heaviness that settles in a man's chest when the world expects him to be unbreakable. You walk through your days holding it all together, and your fears, your failures, your disappointments, tucked neatly behind a steady gaze and a calm tone. You've learned how to smile without joy, to nod without agreeing, to say, I'm fine, when your soul is anything but. No one asks what it cost you to keep that silence. They see the strength, not the strain. They see the calm, not the chaos underneath, but I see you, brother. I see the weight you carry, the one that words can't seem to touch. The kind of burden that doesn't show up in your posture, but in your prayers. The truth is, men often suffer in silence, not because they're heartless, but because they've been told the world won't understand their heart. From a young age, you were taught that vulnerability makes you weak, that tears are for the broken, that emotion is dangerous. So you buried what you felt, thinking that made you strong, but the weight didn't disappear. It just grew heavier in the dark. You carry the pressure to provide, to protect, to persevere, even when you're the one who needs protecting. You bear the expectation to lead others while barely finding the strength to lead yourself. And still you rise every morning, put on the same calm face, and carry the load like it's your duty to suffer quietly. Brother, that silence might look noble, but it's not sustainable. You were never meant to carry it all alone. Even Jesus, the strongest man to ever walk this earth, wept. He cried out in the garden, not because he lacked faith, but because the weight was real. And if the Son of God could admit his sorrow, then so can you. There's no shame in saying, I'm tired. There's no weakness in saying, I need help. You see, the world glorifies independence, but heaven honors honesty. Every burden you keep silent becomes a wall between you and the healing you crave. And walls, brother, might keep the pain out, but they also keep love from getting in. You can't heal what you hide, and you can't be free while pretending you're fine. The truth is, your silence doesn't protect others. It only punishes you. Your family doesn't need your perfection. They need your presence. Your loved ones don't need you to always be strong. They need to know you're still human. The strongest thing a man can do is not to endure quietly. It's to reach out, to speak, to let someone in. Because silence might feel like control, but it's really captivity. Brother, I know it's hard. I know the words don't come easy. You've carried this for so long that the weight almost feels natural now. But you weren't designed to live buried under burdens. You were designed to walk in freedom. God never asked you to carry it all. He said, cast your cares upon me, Not some of them, all of them. That means the guilt, the shame, the regret, the fear, all of it. Let him hold what you can't handle. Let him be your strength when yours runs out. Because silence may seem strong for a season, but it will break you in time. And God doesn't want to watch his sons break quietly. He wants you to speak. To him, to someone you trust, to yourself in truth. Because the moment you speak, the weight begins to shift. Your silence was never meant to be your shelter. It was only ever meant to be a signal, a sign that it's time to let go. Brother, you've carried the world on your shoulders long enough. It's okay to set it down. It's okay to breathe. It's okay to be seen. The weight of silence is heavy, but grace is light. And once you lay it down, you'll realize you were never called to carry it alone. The same silence that once broke you can become the silence that builds you. Brother, silence doesn't have to be your prison forever. There comes a time when the same quiet that once held your pain becomes the space where peace begins to grow. Not all silence is empty. Some silence is sacred. Some silence isn't running from the world. It's returning to your source. You've walked through the valley of unspoken words. You've faced the fear that comes from not being understood. You've carried the invisible weight, stood in the storm, and learned how to endure. But now God is teaching you something deeper, how to be still without being stuck. When silence turns to strength, it's no longer about hiding. It's about hearing. It's about listening, not to the noise of your fear, but to the whisper of your faith. Because silence, when surrendered to God, becomes a sanctuary. It's the pause between battles where you learn that stillness isn't weakness, it's wisdom. The world will tell you to speak louder, to prove yourself, to make noise. But heaven moves in whispers. Moses didn't hear God in the earthquake or the fire. He heard him in a gentle breeze. David didn't win every battle by shouting. Sometimes he just stood still and let God fight for him. Brother, the same silence that once crushed you can now crown you if you let it teach you. You learn that real strength isn't found in noise. It's found in knowing. Knowing who you are. Knowing whose you are. Knowing that you don't have to perform to have purpose. That's when silence becomes power. It's in the silence that you find your center again. Where prayer replaces panic, and presence replaces pressure. It's where you stop reacting and start responding. Where you stop fighting for control and start flowing in trust. Brother, your silence used to mean fear. Now it can mean focus. It used to mean pain. Now it can mean peace. It used to mean hiding. Now it can mean healing. Because when you bring your silence before God, He doesn't leave it empty. He fills it. He fills it with understanding. He fills it with strength. He fills it with direction. The world may still misunderstand your quiet, but that's okay. They don't need to. Because now your silence isn't avoidance. It's alignment. You're no longer running from what hurts. You're standing in what heals. You're no longer afraid of being unseen, because you've learned that God sees you completely. This is where the transformation happens. When the silence that used to suffocate you becomes the silence that sanctifies you. You begin to realize that peace doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, "I'm still here." Brother, you've walked through the valley of silence and you've come out stronger. Not louder, not harder, but deeper. Your strength now comes from stillness, not from striving. The world needs men like that. Men who have learned that quiet doesn't mean defeated, it means disciplined. That silence doesn't mean empty, it means equipped. That the man who once broke in silence can now build in silence. So the next time you fall quiet, let it be holy. Let it be a pause of peace, not of pain. Let your stillness speak louder than your scars, because you, brother, have learned the secret. Silence is not the absence of strength, it's the evidence of it. And now, when the world looks at you and wonders why you're so calm, why you're so steady, why you no longer fight every battle with noise, you'll just smile. Because they won't understand that your silence isn't weakness anymore. It's worship. The kind of worship that says, "I don't need to prove myself. God already proved He's with me." The The kind of strength that doesn't need to shout to be seen. The kind of peace that doesn't need to explain itself to be real. Brother, the silence that once held your pain now holds your power. And that's when silence truly turns to strength. Out of the silence came not defeat, but a voice that could finally speak again. Brother, every story of redemption begins with a moment like this. A moment when you finally realize the silence that once felt like your grave has become the ground where new life is growing. You've walked through shadows. You've faced nights when words wouldn't come, when prayers felt hollow, when faith felt far. But look at you now, still standing, still breathing, still here. That's the thing about grace. It doesn't make noise when it moves. It slips quietly into the cracks of your soul and starts rebuilding you from the inside out. The world doesn't see it happening. They just see you one day, calmer, stronger, clearer, and they wonder what changed. What changed is that you finally stopped fighting your silence and started listening to it. You realized it wasn't punishment. It was preparation. Because before God can use a man publicly, he has to refine him privately. Every scar has a story and every silence has a seed. The same moments that tried to break you became the soil where strength was born. You see, pain doesn't disqualify you. It deepens you. Loss doesn't make you less of a man, it teaches you what truly matters. Now you speak differently, not louder, but with more weight. You listen differently, not just to respond, but to understand. You love differently, not to be seen, but to serve. Brother, this is what rising looks like. It's not about shouting from the mountaintop, it's about standing in peace after walking through the valley. It's not about proving anything. It's about knowing, God carried me here. You used to see silence as emptiness. Now it's where you meet God most clearly. In the still moments when the world slows down, you feel his presence reminding you, you are not forgotten. You are not finished. You are not alone. And this time, your silence isn't hiding. It's healing. It's holy. It's home. The man who rose from silence no longer fears being misunderstood, because he's finally understood himself. He no longer runs from love, because he knows love is not loss. He no longer hides from truth, because he's learned that truth doesn't condemn, it cleanses. Brother, this is your resurrection. The world may still see the same face, but heaven sees a new heart, one that's been humbled, healed, and made whole. So stand tall. Not because the silence is over, but because it's been redeemed. You are no longer the man who suffered in silence. You are the man who found God in it. And from this day forward, when your silence speaks, it will no longer say, I'm afraid. It will say, I'm free. Because that's what grace does. It takes the silence that once broke you and turns it into the strength that builds others.